Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But I do like to start these episodes going over some new news and discoveries I just found out about over the past week, and I don't really have a whole lot to go over in this department, but there are quite a lot of games being launched in September, so there's a huge list to look forward to, and looking into October, we're already getting a ton of exciting games, and I think one that a lot of you might be really excited about is that there is an expansion coming for Wonderlands War, and this is a game that was previously launched on Kickstarter and got a lot of positive feedback. So if this is a game that you are a fan of, or it's a game that you wish you backed previously, you will have another opportunity. Other than that, if you want to get a bit of a sneak peek into the games to come, Alex over at Board Game Co. did post his video up for September if you haven't watched that already, and he posts one of these at the start of each month letting you know of all the campaigns that we know about so far. He also has a ton of other videos going into different reviews, letting you know what he backed, and also games that left his collection and why. He's really offering a lot to the board game community, so if you haven't subscribed to him already, you'll definitely want to check him out. And that's it for an intro, so let's check out the Kickstarters. And the first campaign we have launches on September 12th, and this one's called Kingdom Come Deliverance. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 90 to 150 minutes to play. And in this game, players are going to be working cooperatively to progress through a narrative campaign. They're going to be playing as different heroes, each with their own individual stats and abilities. And this game does take place in history during the Hussite Wars, which was part of the European religious wars and the Crusades. The game does have a few different paths to victory, so it's going to be up to the players to decide what steps they want to take forward and what they want to define as a success as the game's narrative evolves. But along the way, you'll find all sorts of events and characters to interact with and side quests to explore. And because there's so many different branches to the narrative, this game does use a companion app, and that's going to keep track of the different decisions that the players make, as well as their outcome and the different events that will happen in the future based on what the players have done so far. And each player is going to have 3 actions to spend on their turn, and you can use those actions to do different things like move around onto the different tiles on the board, interact with the board in different ways, or help the other players. And when you're interacting with the board, you're going to have all sorts of tokens, characters, enemies, guards, and points of interest to interact with, and each of these will require a skill check in order to determine your success, and the different stats that the players have will be able to help with those skill checks. So depending on the makeup of your character, or if another player is able to help you, that can really change the outcome of the different decisions, so you'll really want to take that into consideration for the events that you really don't want to fail. And it's these different interactions that will really open up the board and allow players to explore, because it'll allow you to enter buildings, lay out new tiles in new areas of the map, or even cover existing tiles depending on the results and if something's changed in that area. And the players will really want to be careful anytime that they're in the vicinity of a guard, because the guards are trying to get in your way, and you're going to be raising your suspicion depending on the actions that you do. But luckily, at the end of each turn, there is a refresh phase where your suspicion will cool down, and your stamina will be refreshed along with your 3 actions. And if this one does sound interesting to you, definitely go ahead and check out the campaign and sign up to get notified, because it will get you a free extra character added to your pledge. And one other thing I wanted to point out is that this game is fully narrated by professional actors, and I did listen to some of it. It sounded really solid, so if you're not so much into reading a narrative, but you do enjoy hearing it, that is always an option. And of course, you can find links to this campaign in the description below if you want to know more. Also launching on September 13th, we have Valroc, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a campaign that I thought was launching a few months back, but instead it got pushed till now. So I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And in this game, players are playing as wizards in a competition to acquire the Archmage title. And for that, you'll have to defeat or tame multiple creatures. The game is divided into 2 phases, and the first phase is the drafting phase. And during this phase, players are going to be drafting different monsters that they're either going to have to fight or attempt to tame. And the second phase uses primarily worker placement, where players will be putting their worker disciples out on the map in order to perform different actions like train their skills, attend magical lessons, and pray to the gods, and earn skill points in each of the 4 elements of fire, water, earth, and air. And the first player who has defeated or tamed 6 creatures wins the game. Also launching on September 17th, we have Sagrada Artisans, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And this is not only a roll and write version of the very well-loved game Sagrada, but it is also a legacy game. And if you're not familiar with the original Sagrada, this is a game that I have in my collection, and I'm never getting rid of it because it's one of my favorites, and with good reason because this is in the top 200 games of all time. But if you're not familiar with how this game plays, you're essentially trying to build stained glass windows, and players are going to be drafting dice from a shared pool, and then you're going to be inserting those dice into different areas in your stained glass window, trying to never have 2 dice of the same color or of the same value side by side. But you are trying to meet different requirements, as there's going to be different values and colors that you're trying to get into specific spots of your board, as well as different shared objectives and your own personal objectives. You'll often find yourself in tough spots, so there's a lot of different tools that you can use to break the rules in different ways, but those will come at a cost. And this version of the game does build upon those base rules, but there are a lot of differences and a lot of things that I think are really impressive. But instead of placing dice into your own personal player board, this version is going to have a sort of coloring book where players are going to be going through the different pages as the game continues and taking on different challenges and different types of stained glass windows that the book provides. And I think this is a good time to mention that this one is my own personal pick of the week. And I say that with a high degree of confidence because this is a game that I've actually played. I've played through the entire Legacy campaign, and I was honestly blown away by it. I already do love Sagrada, and it does maintain a lot of the aspects of the game that I really love, but it also brings a lot of new mechanisms and ideas that wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the Legacy aspect of this game and the way that the coloring book actually works opposed to the dice and the board that were in the original game. And I really do think that exploring different ideas and experiences that just weren't possible otherwise is the sign of a really good Legacy game. And this game definitely delivers on that because the types of stained glass windows and their patterns that this game allows you to attempt just would never be possible outside of this design. But it doesn't just stop there because new components and mechanisms will be introduced into the game as the game continues, and these can be triggered by different events or players' actions. And players will also get opportunities to choose their own tools and player powers specific to them that they'll be able to maintain for a period of time as the game moves forward. But this time around, players won't just be focused on the stained glass windows because players will also be building up the Sagrada Familia from the ground up. And the Sagrada Familia is the actual name of the building if you're not familiar with that. And this game does offer a little bit of a narrative as players move forward through the campaign, giving players insight into the history of the Sagrada Familia and the different challenges and successes that it encountered along the way. And each player is going to be representing their own family line of artisans within that story, and each player's individual successes will play in as they move through the generations. And of course, I am leaving out a lot of details here. This is a Legacy game and I don't want to spoil too much, but the game does offer a ton of different surprises. And there is quite a lot of game here, but not in an overwhelming way. And of course, like most Legacy games, this one is best played with the same player group. But during my play sessions, we did have a few people jump in and out, and there are absolutely no issues, and everyone still had a ton of fun. But to avoid any more spoilers, I'll just say that if this game does sound interesting to you, go ahead and check out the campaign. I'll have links in the description below. And if it hasn't launched yet, you can always click that notify me button to check it out once it's launched. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more info and exciting content that you'll be able to discover over there. Also launching on September 13th, we have Mushroom Sorcerer, and this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play, and this is a game of area control and resource management that takes place on a 3D randomized map. And the way that you win this game is either be the first to gain 30 influence, or be the first to control a certain amount of areas by building your towers. And the way that this game plays is that each player is going to be controlling their own asymmetrical character, and each round plays over 3 phases. There's the Twilight, the Night, and the Daybreak phases. And during the Twilight phase, players are going to be choosing a potion specific to their character, which is going to add a new ability that you can use for the rest of the game. After that, we move into the Night phase, where players have an option to perform one out of the 4 possible actions that they have access to. And the first option here is to grow one of your mushroom towers out on the board, and each area on the board is associated with a certain element, and depending on where you're growing that tower, that's actually going to move you up the element track associated with that location. Moving up in these tracks will allow you to generate elements of those resources, and there's a few different elements that players will have access to. The fire elements allow players to destroy, where the stone elements allow them to protect. The water elements are required to grow your towers, and the thunder elements allow you to gain energy for different spells. And then finally, the moon elements offer a different path to victory because if you control enough of these spaces, then you will automatically win the game. But rather than growing one of your towers, you could instead choose to pick up and cast a scroll, and these can be used to harm your opponents, and these can be also chained together. And the third option you can do is to attack an opponent's tower that's adjacent to one of your own. And this is where the fire and stone elements will really come into play so that you can put a lot of pressure on your opponent while protecting yourself. And the fourth and final option for your action is to summon a resource from one of the tracks that you've made progress on. And after all players have performed their actions, we move into the third phase, which is essentially a refresh and cleanup phase where certain things will be reset and players will recharge their magic up to full. And then the game continues like this over a series of rounds until one player gets either those 30 victory points or is able to control enough of those moon locations. And if you're interested in this one, I have links in the description below. Also launching on September 13th, we have Age of Inventors, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 40 to 80 minutes to play, and this is an economic worker placement game where players are going to be recruiting different inventors in order to gain the skills that they need to create different inventions and contribute back to society, because the player who's able to contribute the most to society is going to be the player that wins the game. And the way this game works is that it uses a main board as well as individual player boards, and it plays over a series of 4 rounds, each with 2 phases, with the first phase being the upkeep phase and then followed by the player phase. During the upkeep phase, players are going to be getting their workers returned back to their board, and then they're going to be drawing an event card, taking resources based on their income, and then drafting equipment from a shared pool. And the equipment are really neat in this game because these are what will give each player their own unique special abilities, and you're going to be getting 1 each round, and since there's 4 rounds, you're going to be ending the game with 4 different equipment cards. These are going to get placed into the center of your board, and at the end of the upkeep phase, you're going to be able to activate these, but you can also put workers on these in the player phase. And during the player phase, there's a couple options that players have. They can either place one of their workers, or they can flip one of the switches on their player board into the on position. When you're placing a worker, there's a few different options that you have. You can either place it onto one of the invention spaces out on your own personal player board in order to reactivate that invention, or if you don't have an invention there, you can still place it there and get that base ability that comes pre-printed on the board. And these will usually allow you to convert or gain a resource of a certain type. Or instead you can put a worker out onto the main player board, and you have a few options when you're doing this. You can either put the worker onto one of the inventor hexes that are in the center of the board, and when you do that, that will allow you to use the ability on that hex, which usually allows you to convert resources into other resources. But if that is owned by another player, the resource that you're paying in order to convert that resource actually goes to the opposing player. But if you own it yourself, it just goes back into the pool, so you really want other players to use your inventor hexes. You can also place one of your workers to move up the ingenuity track, but you'll have to pay a cost to be able to do this, but this will be worth victory points depending on the order at the end of the game. You can also place a worker to gain an objective card, which will give you some sort of requirements that you'll try to meet before the end of the game in order to score those victory points. Or finally, you can place one of your workers into the inventor market in order to remove all those inventors and refresh that market with brand new cards. And if you choose that action, or you choose to just activate one of your switches instead of placing a worker, you'll be able to pay resources to gain an inventor from the market. You'll also gain the matching hex associated with that inventor, and it will just go into your hand. Or instead of paying to get an inventor hex, you can instead pay to gain a invention hex. And that will also just go into your hand, and if you want to play either of these, that will also require you to activate one of your switches, and when you do that, you'll be able to place these hexes out onto the main board. When you place one of your inventor hexes out on the board, you'll immediately gain its benefit, but you'll also be putting your colored tokens out on that hex to indicate that it's yours. But instead of an inventor, if you place one of the invention hexes out on the board, you're going to have to place it in such a way that it is adjacent to one of the inventors that has the skills in order to create that invention. And when you do that, you're going to gain its reward immediately, and you'll also advance in the industrial, economic, or academic track. And the reason that you're going to want to advance in these tracks is that you'll gain different benefits and victory points for passing certain milestones. And there's 2 ways that the game can end. Either you reach the end of the 4th round, or the entire board is full of hexes and there's no spaces left. At that point, players will add up their victory points, and the player with the most wins the game. Also launching on the 13th, we have Explosions in the Laboratory, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 20 minutes to play, and this is a push your luck game that I thought was launching last week, but instead it got pushed till now, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this is a push your luck game that plays over 4 phases. The first phase is the planning phase, and this is where you're going to be able to play one-time use cards that can affect scoring for your turn. And then we move into the mixing phase, where a number of chemical cards from the deck are going to be laid out onto the table. This is going to let players know what chemicals they must mix. Throughout the game, there's going to be a fire level that's increasing, and as that fire level grows, the more volatile the mixtures will become. Players will be drawing these cards, and then they'll be able to place them into their own flasks, and they can continue to do this until they decide to stop. And when they stop, they can score their mixture, but if they push too far and create one of the combos of chemicals in your flask that causes an explosion, then that's going to end your turn immediately and you won't get any points. And the player who has the most points at the end of the game wins the game. Also launching on the 13th, we have Necromolds Monster Battles. And this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play. And this is a game that was previously released, but it is completely sold out. So this is another opportunity to get the game, but it's also going to come with a new expansion and brand new monster molds for players to explore. And this is a competitive battling game that has a really unique twist, because the way that this game works is you're actually going to be creating your units out of Play-Doh. The game comes with a few different molds, and each mold is going to create some sort of monster with its own individual stats. And throughout the game, players will be creating different units by using these molds and then issuing them out on the board in order to attack their opponents. Players are going to be rolling their action dice each round to see the options that they have, and there's a few different results that players can get. They can either get movement to allow them to move around on the board, or they can get range to activate any ranged attacks that they might have, or they could roll magic, which has a few options. It can either gain you gems, which will allow you to get more combat dice during the combat phase, or instead you can use it to activate one of your monster's special abilities. And if there's an opposing monster in range and you're able to attack it, each player is going to be rolling their combat dice, and each mold is going to specify how many attack or defense dice a specific monster gets. And then those players are going to be getting their associated dice, but you will be able to augment this by spending any gems that you've accumulated so far in order to add more dice into your pool, essentially improving your odds for winning the battle. But if one player does enough damage to the other, then they're going to be able to completely remove that opposing monster from the game by crushing it with their own seal ring. And this will have the fun effect of having squished monsters all over the board. And the game will offer a few different ways to play, but usually it's the last player standing that wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, be sure to check out the campaign page, and I have links in the description below. Also launching on the 13th, we have Spark Riders 3000, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a cooperative scenario-based game where players are trying to deliver precious cargo to the deep reaches of space. Each turn, players are going to be able to move and then perform an action, and when you move, you'll be able to move up to 3 rooms within your spaceship, and then you'll be able to perform one action to either pilot, shoot, or tinker. And each of these actions will require you to roll dice in order to determine your level of success, but each character is also going to be coming with its own character cards to make them more adept at certain actions. And the different things that you might do is to put up shields and defenses, attack enemies, harvest debris and resources, and repair your damages by using those debris and resources. And a really neat cooperative aspect of this game is the way that players can coordinate their actions, because during your movement portion of your turn, you'll be able to place a token in one of the rooms that you move through, and if a player uses that room and performs an action in that room on their turn, then you can actually augment their abilities, because that token will grant a bonus to the player that performs an action in that room. But players will be attacked by hordes of enemies, and if you take too much damage to certain portions of your ship, then that portion can be completely destroyed, and you're going to be removing rooms from your ship as this happens. And if this room happens to be essential to your ship's survival, then the players are going to lose the game, but if you're able to complete your delivery before that happens, then all the players win. And this game will offer a lot of different scenarios for players to play through, and if you want to know more, I have links in the description below. And launching on September 14th, we have Dune War for Arrakis, and this is the next asymmetrical strategy game coming from CMON, where players are going to be fighting for control of the planet, maneuvering troops, harvesting spice from the desert, and avoiding or challenging giant space worms. The game features an action dice system and event cards that will create a different story each time that you play the game, and the game's designers also include the designers from the game War of the Ring, so I think this game will be inspired by that game and probably have a lot of similarities, but I'm sure it will iterate on it and offer a slightly different experience. But each round, players are going to be rolling a number of action dice to determine which actions they have access to, and then each turn, players are going to be be spending one of these dice in order to perform the associated action, and there's a few different actions that players can do. They can either perform the strategy action to direct legions and move or attack other units, perform the leadership action, which allows using their leaders to command their armies or perform special actions, or the deploy action to recruit more troops, the mentat action to gain or play planning cards, or the house action, which has special effects depending on the faction that you're playing as. The planning cards will have special effects and powerful abilities that players will want to time appropriately to tip the game in their favor. And of course, doing all this to gather the most spice, which is the most critical resource in all of the galaxy, eradicate your enemies, and be the player to dominate the planet. That's about all the info I have right now about how the game plays, so if you want to know more, I have links in the description below to the campaign, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more details over there. And also launching on the 14th, we have Pueblo, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes just 60 minutes to play. And this is a really interesting abstract strategy game where each player is going to be starting the game with a collection of 3D blocks. And there's 2 different colors that each player is going to have. There's going to be their player color and then a neutral color. And on a player's turn, you're going to take a pair of these blocks and then decide whether you want to first play the neutral color or first play your player color. But the catch here is that on your following turn, you have to play the opposite of the one that you chose. And to play a block, you're just going to be putting it anywhere out on the main board, but because there is a 3D element to this game, you can never place a block so that there's an empty gap underneath it. After you've done this, you can then move the chieftain up to 4 spaces, and the chieftain is this little meeple that's going to be going around the perimeter of the board. And wherever that chieftain stops, he's going to be looking down the row or column of that board, and then scoring points to whichever colors he can see, with higher blocks generating more points. But the thing here is that you actually want the lowest points in order to win the game, so you don't want the chieftain to see your blocks, so you're always going to want to move it so that the chieftain can't see yours, but can see your opponent's if that's possible. Otherwise, you might want to try and get neutral blocks in the way. But if you move the chieftain to a corner spot where there is no row or column for the chieftain to look down, instead you're going to be looking at the grid from top down and then scoring points based on that. The game continues like this, with players alternating turns until all the blocks are placed, and then the player with the least points wins the game. And launching on September 15th, we have Project EOS Rise, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 180 minutes to play. And I didn't catch this game until recently, so I wasn't able to perform my usual research on it, so I'll just go ahead and read the description here, where Project EOS Rise is a 1 to 4 player cooperative space adventure game that matches up worker placement, push your luck, and dice placement game mechanics. You and your crew will travel through the universe, hunting down fast radio bursts that will advance your progress towards finding the Paradise Planet. Once the planet is located, the crew will put everything on the line to attempt to reach it. The game uses a roll for location game system that ensures each playthrough generates a unique universe with unique challenges, as well as a light RPG system that allows crews to explore and discover multiple paths to victory. Whatever path you take, the 4 characters, the pilot, the combat specialist, the engineer, and the medical director, can advance their skills to give you the best benefit to your mission. Do you spend your credits to expand the EOS, or open up new actions like mining, scanning, or crafting? Do you want to smuggle and deliver interesting cargo to different galaxies to gain intel and advance your progress, or would you rather attack alien ships using the combined strength and skills of the crew? Whatever path you choose, time is of the essence because each year brings the star marker 1 space closer to extinction. But whatever you do, you'll always want to keep the starship EOS in working condition, because if the command room is destroyed, your mission is aborted and the game is lost. And that's everything I have to share right now, but if you're interested in sandbox games and want to know more, definitely check this one out in the links in the description below. And launching on September 15th, we have Cholas, and this plays 1 to 5 players and takes just 60 to 90 minutes to play. And in this game, players are competing to build a shared temple. On a player's turn, they're going to have a few actions that they can choose from, but you can only pick 1 action on your turn. And those actions are to either draw 2 tiles from the draw bag, return up to 3 tiles of matching color in order to redraw those tiles, draw 1 build card, or play 1 build card, and these are used to be able to put your tiles out on the main board, but they are going to come with some placement requirements that you're going to have to follow if you're able to do it. And this is also how you gain victory points, so you'll really want to be trying to match up your build cards with the tiles that you have on hand. And then finally, there's an additional action, but it's only available in the advanced version of the rules, and that's to perform the sculpt action. And this is going to require you to pay a cost in order to place sculpts on top of the already placed tiles, in order to add sculptures and different stone ornaments out onto the main board and earn you some additional victory points. The player who has the most victory points at the end of the game based on their contribution to the temple is the player that wins the game. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we have an awesome giveaway to announce, and all you have to do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below, and this is for a pledge for Legacy of You, which is currently on Kickstarter now. And if you're not familiar with this game, it's the next game being launched from Garphill Games, which already has a ton of games in the top 100, but what makes this one a little bit different is that this one is a solo game. And in this game, you're going to be using worker placement and resource management in order to prevent the flooding of the Yellow River. But it's not quite as simple as that, because not only are you going to be fighting against the river, you're also going to be fighting against different barbarian invaders. Throughout the game, you're going to be building canals in order to reroute overflow water, but you can only do this once per turn, and this game does have a deck building element to it, and every time you cycle through your deck, this wave is going to move one more tile up on the main board. And if that wave ever reaches a tile where you haven't built the canal yet, then you immediately lose the game. You'll also be spending your resources to gain new cards into your hand, and you'll be able to play those cards in order to perform different actions or gain more resources, but you do always have the option to completely discard the card from the game in order to get a little bit more of a more powerful option that you might want to use when things get a little tough. The problem with this, though, is that it makes the rest of the game a little bit more tougher, since now you have less cards to work with. You're going to be putting workers out on the different areas of the board to gain different benefits or perform different actions, but you're also going to be using your workers to fight back against the barbarians, because any barbarians that are left over at the end of a turn are not only going to occupy space in your market where you can buy more cards, but they also will require a sacrifice of some sort. So you're either going to be losing resources or one of your cards from your hand if you do not have the resources to pay. And this is a really nice one to win because this game was my pick of the week last week, and I think this game has a lot of credibility based on the publisher's history, but I also just think that the game looks like a ton of fun, and I also like how there's different competing challenges that are constantly going to be shifting your focus and creating a lot of pinch points for players to navigate. At one point you might be really concerned about the river, whereas at another point you might be really worried about your hand size and the looming barbarians. But this giveaway is going to be for a pledge to get you a core copy of the game, as well as the promo cards. And under this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag you, spelt YU, and then just tell us something about you. And by you, I mean you, like YOU. Have you ever stopped the flood or fought with barbarians? I want to know. But now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways, and the first one we had was Uluk. And to draw a winner, I used this application here, and all these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and appreciate the work that goes into it and can contribute in any way, I truly do appreciate it. I have links in the description below to my Patreon, and any help there truly makes a difference and helps make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable for me. But let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And every once in a while, on a rare occasion, I do mess up these draws by putting in some info wrong and then have to redraw the winner. And when I do that, I pause the video and then I redraw, often forgetting to unpause the video when I do that. This happened last week and it just happened again now. I swear this isn't a trend. It's just the way it goes sometimes. But I already drew the winner, and our winner is one of our Patreon subscribers, Erwin Sloof. Congratulations, I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for Uluk. But we did have one more giveaway, and I will definitely get this one right, and this was for a pledge for Space Line. So I'll do the exact same thing here. Go ahead and draw those comments, and draw a winner. And the winner for Space Line is Nick Glore, and this is one of our viewers, and he mentioned thanks for the content. I look forward to it every week. It's always awesome to hear that the content is offering some value, and it's even better to know that it's offering you some free games. So congratulations, and just email me at adam@shelfclutter.com and I'll get that pledge all sorted out. And that's all I have for you this week, so as always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.